So thinking about middle school, oh, what a lovely time. And I was in middle school right around the turn of the millennium. You don't need to do the math, so just gloss right over that. But I was like any other millennial girl at the time, and I was obsessed with boy bands. Yes, I know. Yeah, boy band fans, come on, you can do it. Thank you, thank you. So I know all you music snobs out there are like, it's not real music. I don't care, all right? I love it. I love my boy bands. So I want to see how well you guys know your boy bands. So I've got some pictures of some boy band members, and I want you to just yell out if you know the member or the band, or both of which they come from. So first one, what do we got? Yes, Nick Lachey, thank you. From the band? Thank you. Yes, 98 Degrees, Nick Lachey. I thought I'd give you an easy one. He's had a career after 98 Degrees, so it's a little bit of a gimme. This next one, not so much. Check out this next one. I know this is a toughie. Anybody know who this is? John Kaiser in the first service knew it. I was shocked. No, this is Dan Miller from the band O-Town. So, maybe not top tier boy band, but O-Town, they had a couple bops. It was good. But the reason why I put him up here is because he is actually a Twinsburg, Ohio native. So, yeah, he's from Twinsburg, Ohio. A little factoid for you. So, there's Dan Miller. Next one. I had to go into the 90s for this one, but close. Donnie Wahlberg. Yes, some NKOTB. New Kids on the Block, baby. So, yes, so that's a little 90s, but we're going to let it slide. We're going to let it slide. All right, and then the last one. Anybody know? Yes, from NSYNC. Yeah, so now a lot of you might think that NSYNC is the best boy band, and you might also think that they are my favorite. And that is because if you've ever been to Freak Out, and when Jeremy Speth starts to play his boy band playlist at the end of the night, and I just go nuts on the dance floor to like bye, 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 and tearing up my heart, you might think that they're my favorite, and you would in fact be wrong on both accounts, because the reigning champion of all boy bands will always be this boy band. Who is this? Backstreet Boys, thank you. So I am a huge Backstreet Boys fan, and my sister and I loved the Backstreet Boys when we were in middle school, and all we wanted was to go to the Millennium Tour. When they put this album out and announced they were coming to Cleveland in March of 2000, we were like, oh my gosh, please, this was my Eras tour, people. This was my Eras tour. And I was like, I need to be at this concert. So when tickets went on sale, we did everything we could. And by we, I mean my parents. So my mom and my dad tried so hard to get us tickets. My dad was on the phone calling Ticketmaster. My mom and my sister were actually waiting in line physically outside of a Ticketmaster box office trying to get tickets. Nope, didn't get them. Then, the coolest radio station at that time, Jammin' 92.3. You guys remember that? It was not The Fan. It was Jammin' 92.3. They announced, we're going to give away Backstreet Boys tickets, every night for a week. If you're the 9th caller, you're going to get Backstreet Boys tickets. So my dear sweet mom sat next to the radio every night for a week and tried to call to be the 9th caller to get us tickets to Backstreet Boys. Did not work. And my mom also realized that she hates all the music that we listen to. And so, it did not work. We were so sad. And we're like, I don't think we're going to go. This isn't going to happen. And then one day, my mom and dad pulled us into the living room. And they were like, we have a surprise for you guys. And they were like, you're going to Backstreet Boys. And we're like, oh, we're going to Backstreet Boys. We're so pumped, jumping around, super excited. And of course, I asked my dad, how did you get tickets? This is amazing. And, he did a perfect dad answer, don't worry about it. Took care of it. So I had this image of my dad, in a back alley with a guy in a trench coat being like, Backstreet Boys tickets. When in fact, he used the Yellow Pages. Students, this is a book. They send it in the mail. It has phone numbers in it. He called a ticket broker, and he got tickets to Backstreet Boys. So in case anybody was ever wondering, I have the best parents in the whole world, and we got to go to Backstreet Boys. And by the way, my dad actually recently found our ticket stub in a box in the attic. So there you go. There's the official Backstreet Boys ticket stub. It was no QR code, my friends. You had one of these things, and you get to keep it for 30 years. So look at that. So I still remember some pretty specific details about this concert. It was a great experience. But as one does, we are going to now pivot to the Bible. So open up your Bibles. We're going to go to Exodus chapter 32, verses 1 through 8. We're going to get there eventually. If you don't have a Bible, please take one from the front of the seats in front of you and the racks. You can take it home with you, or you can pull it up on your phone, however you want to do it. I also want to tell you that I'm going to tell you what I tell my Amplify students, which is you can feel free to take notes. It helps, I promise. I was a public school teacher, and you just can't stamp that out of me. So get out your number 2 pencils, and let's go. So we're going to do a little bit of background on the book of Exodus first. This is also something that I try to tell our Amplify students, that if you're going to dig into the Bible, you want to make sure that you have context, because if you don't have context, then things are not always going to make sense the way that they are intended. And the three things that I think you should always look at before you dig in deep to a book of the Bible are: what literary style is it written in? The Bible is a big book written in lots of different literary styles, like poetry and wisdom and law and history and all sorts of things, and that can really dictate how you understand what you're reading. So you got to know what literary style it's written in, you got to know who wrote it, and you got to know who they wrote it to, the audience. So the book of Exodus is a mixed genre book. There's lots of genres in it, but the main form, and what we'll be focusing on today, is historical narrative. It was written by Moses, and it was written to the Israelites, or God's people. So that's the book of Exodus. We are focusing on chapter 32 today, like I said. So if you can imagine jumping into any book in chapter 32, you've missed some things, right? And so I'm going to give you a quick rundown of everything that's happened up to this point, and I'm going to have to skip a lot of details in order to make this not last 17 hours. So I encourage you, please go back to Exodus and read it, because it's a great story. But here's kind of a rundown of what had happened to bring us up to chapter 32. And it's background you need to understand what we're talking about. So the Israelites had been living in Egypt ever since the end of Genesis, when Joseph and his family settled there and stayed there. So they're hanging out in Egypt, and they're growing in numbers, too big. And the Egyptian Pharaoh, who's the king of Egypt, is like, this is starting to make me a little nervous, yo. Like, there's a lot of these Israelites, and I'm afraid that they're going to overtake us. So he puts them into hard slavery and just physical backbreaking work, and then he also decides that we're going to kill the firstborn son of all the Israelites to try to control the population. Moses is an Israelite, but he escapes that. He becomes powerful in Egypt, and eventually God calls him to rescue his people. He's like, Moses, rescue my people. And Moses is like, no. And God's like, yes. And Moses is like, no. And God's like, yes. And then Moses is like, fine. And then he goes and does it, and then he goes up to Pharaoh, and he's like, hey, my people are in slavery. Let them go. And Pharaoh is like, no. And Moses is like, come on, I got God on my side. Miracle, miracle. Pharaoh says, no. Miracle, miracle. Pharaoh says, no. And then finally, Pharaoh's like, okay, that was a pretty big miracle. I say yes. So now the people are let go, and they go down, and they're going in the desert. They're going to God's promised land, and they face some more barriers, because basically Pharaoh changes his mind, and he's like, you know what? I think I want those slaves back. So he starts sending his Egyptian army to go gather them up and bring them back to Egypt. And so the Israelites are trapped, but not when they got God on their side. God parts the Red Sea, gives them an escape route, and they continue on their way. God guides them with a pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire. He gives them bread from the sky. He taps a rock and gives them water when they're in the desert and have no hope. I mean, God's taking care of everything, right? So once they finally settled in Mount Sinai, Moses goes up to the top of this mountain to talk to God. And when he's talking to God, he gives him a whole bunch of laws, and they enter into an agreement together called a covenant. And the laws are summarized into the 10 Commandments, which you might recognize. The 10 Commandments, like I said, they're just a summary of lots and lots of laws. And so he comes down off the mountain, and he's like, guys, I made an agreement with God. We're going to follow him. We're going to be great examples to the neighbors around us, the neighboring nations, and God's going to take care of us. Here are his laws. And the people are like, yay, we agree. Little time passes. Moses goes back up to the top of the mountain. And this time, God's like, all right, I got this plan. We're going to do something called the Ark of the Covenant and a tabernacle, and it's going to be really cool, because now my presence is going to be with you wherever you go. And Moses is like, that's cool. And God's like, yeah, it's cool, but it's complicated. So let me tell you about it. And so he's up there for a while. Like, he's up there for like 40 days. And meanwhile, we're at the bottom of the mountain, and the Israelites are like, Moses, why is this taking so long? Like, this is like Disney World without a lightning lane. Like, what are we going to do? Like, can't handle this. So they're very frustrated. They're very impatient. And Aaron, who is Moses' right-hand man, is the one who's like in charge of the people. And that is where Exodus 32, 1-8 is about to happen. And I'm going to ask my friend Brandon Elliott, who is a high school student at Amplify. He's going to tell you the main part of our story. So Brandon Elliott, via video, take it away.
Hey Momentum, my name's Brandon Elliott. I attend student ministry Amplify. Make some noise, y'all. Anyway, today I'm going to tell you a Bible story of the golden calf. If you want to turn to it in your Bible, it's Exodus 32 verses 1-8. So at the beginning of our story, Moses is at the top of the mountain talking to God. And after so long of him being up there, the people at the base of the mountain that he's leading away from Egypt, away from slavery, end up going, hey, Aaron, where's our dude at? He's supposed to be leading us out of here. We need a God to lead us out of here. And then after so long, Aaron gets this idea in his head. He asks them to give him his jewelry. He melts it down and forms this golden calf. And once the people see it, they are extremely excited to have something to worship and offer to. So then the next day, Aaron says, we're having a festival. We're going to sacrifice to it. We're going to worship it. And after they start doing that, God at the top of the mountain with Moses goes, Moses, go set your people straight. Not in those exact words, but he says, hey, you need to go get your people quick because they have turned from me so fast. They are so corrupt right now. And look how fast they've turned from me. You need to go get them immediately. That's a Bible story, y'all. Have a good day, Momentum. Love y'all.
Yeah, give it up for Brandon. He's sitting right back there. Yeah, I know. I'm going to call you out. There he is. All right. Great job, Brandon. So, yeah, the Israelites are about 3 months removed from their time in slavery. And prior to their rescue, they had been living in Egypt for approximately 400 years. So for generations, they had been living with the Egyptians. And we just touched on this a little bit at Amplify last week for those of you who were there. But the Egyptian culture and the Egyptians, they were polytheistic, which means that they worshiped many gods. And actually, historians believe that somewhere around 1,500 deities or gods were worshipped by the Egyptians. And it was their practice to build statues to worship those gods. And the Israelites were living amongst all of this. And so while we don't see the Israelites completely giving up on God or the God of Abraham, they were definitely influenced by the people around them and were worshiping those other idols by the Egyptians. In fact, in Joshua, which is another book in the Old Testament, we actually see evidence of the Israelites still holding on to their statues that they had made when they were in Egypt, and they keep popping up in the story. So they were for sure influenced. And the crazy thing was, the Israelites just saw firsthand all of these miracles done by God, all the miracles that God did to get them out of Egypt, parting the Red Sea, bread from the sky, water from a rock. I mean, they saw it firsthand, and they were still impatient and losing faith in God while they had to wait for him at the bottom of a mountain. And just weeks before this, God had specifically told them, don't do this. And so if we look back at Exodus 20, verses 4 through 5, and this is part of the 10 Commandments. There it is. Yes. Good job, Riley. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above or on the earth beneath or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. That's Exodus 20, 4 through 5. And then in that same chapter, just a little bit further down, the 22nd, 23rd verse, he repeats it. And he says, tell the Israelites this, you have seen for yourselves that I have spoken to you from heaven. You have seen my miracles with your eyeballs. You have seen them. Do not make any gods to be alongside me. Do not make for yourselves gods of silver or gods of gold. So they just made these laws. God just made these laws, and they just agreed with him that they were going to do this. And it was called a covenant. And we tend to use the word covenant and promise interchangeably. It's not necessarily wrong, but there's a little bit more meat to a covenant than just a promise. So this is a definition of covenant in the legal sense. It says it's a formal binding agreement, promise, or contract between two or more parties to perform or refrain from specific actions. So in the biblical sense, it's usually this relationship between God and his people. But the thing that I want you to focus on is that it's between two or more parties. When we look at covenant, we tend to just focus on the God side of the promise. And I get it, super important. I mean, the God side of the promise is everything, right? It's what leads us to salvation. So I'm not diminishing that. But I think we often forget that there was another half to that contract, and it was the promise that the people made. And the people said, like, God, because you are God, because you rescued us from Egypt, we promise to follow you. We promise not only to follow you, but follow all those strict laws that you gave us so that we can be a good representation to all the neighbors around us who don't follow you. Like, God, we promise, right? And how quickly do they go back on that promise? Like, less than 30 days. And they're already like, I'm out. Like, and isn't that such a theme in the Bible? Like, God continually keeps his promises. He is the promise keeper. And we continually do not. I mean, and it happens over and over again. You know, I remember reading these stories as a kid and seeing the old movie, The 10 Commandments. Anybody see The 10 Commandments with Charlton Heston? Yeah, straight out of 1956. Super relevant. Yeah? Okay, no? It's all right. I understand. So every Easter, they used to play this because Easter is also Passover, if you didn't put that. Okay. So they would play that movie every Easter, and I'd watch it on TV with my mom. And I remember watching the scene where they would create this gold statue. And it actually says in verse 6 of chapter 32 that they engaged in revelry. So if you look at that word revelry, I know it's not a word you use very often, possibly. I don't know your vocabulary, but revelry is actually, when translated, it has a sexual connotation. So this was not just like, we're throwing a party, okay? It was, they fell hard and they fell far. And so it can be very easy for us to judge the Israelites. And like I said, when I would watch these scenes, I remember thinking to myself, like, okay, I've never built a statue out of gold and bowed to it. So I'm going to take this commandment, I'm going to stick it in the column of the not a problem for me, right? And I think that we sometimes do that, or maybe it's just me, I apologize for that, but we also tend to criticize and judge the Israelites very harshly, but we are not really all that different from this. You know, idolatry is not just the act of creating a gold statue and bowing down to it physically. That is not the whole picture of idolatry. So this is a definition of idolatry. Idolatry is when we let anything take God's place in our lives. Something we feel like we can't live without. Something we use to find our source of meaning, identity, or purpose. Something that consumes our attention and our decisions. You know, we were literally created to worship. That was what God created us to do. But that worship was supposed to go towards God. But since the time of Adam and Eve, we have been pulling our focus from God and putting it on substandard things, putting it on something else that can't measure up. I would even argue that idolatry is the most foundational sin that human beings have. But the problem is, when it's not wrapped in the package of a gold statue that you bow to, it's a little harder to recognize sometimes. And in our world, there are so many things that could become idols, things that are even unassuming, innocent, good even, that it's harder to identify. So I'm going to do something really quick. I'm going to go through a list of things that could possibly be idols in our lives. It's not an exhaustive list, but I try to think of things that most people would struggle with. And we're going to do two things. I want you to truly evaluate, like, what role do these things play in my life? Are they too important? Do they take the place of God? Do they meet any of those kind of requirements that we saw in the definition of idolatry? And the other thing I want you to do is close your eyes. I know it's weird, but you're going to do it. Come on, close your eyes. It's going to help you focus. I know. All right, here we go. So I'm going to read them out loud. Sin, entertainment, hobbies, travel, comfort, job or career, intellect or intelligence, education, success, money, security, exercise or fitness, your spouse, your kids, your desire for a spouse, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, people-pleasing, reputation, social media, house, car, or other material objects, appearance or beauty, approval from friends and family, success in a sport, success in music, grades or academic success, politics, patriotism, self. All right, open your eyes. Like I said, there's a lot of things besides sin that are not inherently bad on this list. There's nothing wrong with placing importance on them and striving to do well in these areas. But the problem is when we take a good thing and we make it a God thing. That's when we start to enter into idol territory. And I will also tell you is as I'm going through that list, if there was anything that made you want to be like, but, well, like the thing that made you want to like instinctually like defend your reason for why they're important in your life, ding, ding, ding. That's probably the thing that is either your idol or the thing that is closely becoming your idol. And then I would also say, if nothing on that list really, you were like, I'm good, you're like me, like, that commandment's not for me. Like, if that's the case, I would caution you that the last one I said, self, the most common idol, because it doesn't take just one form. When your idol is self, that means that all your decisions, all your thoughts, all your actions flow through the mindset of how does this impact me? How does this make me feel comfortable? How does this make me feel good? How does this make me feel fill in the blank? If that is the filter that you are approaching things, your idol is probably self. Instead of approaching everything through what does God want me to do? How does God tell me to act in this situation? How does God tell me I should respond to this problem? And so if none of them really jumped out at you, I would hazard a guess that it is probably self. All right. So we're going to take a look at Jeremiah 2:13. So this verse right here says, "My people have committed two sins. They have forsaken me, the spring of living water, and have dug their own cisterns, broken cisterns that cannot hold water." So this is God speaking. We literally have access to the living water, the salvation of the one true God who will sustain us forever, never run out, and never fail us. But we continue to build broken bowls that leak water, and cannot sustain us. Everything on that list and more, it will let you down. It will fail you. There will come a time in your life that whatever you are placing all of your worth on will no longer work out. It will no longer fulfill you. Look at the Israelites. They actually start to attribute the miracles of God to that gold statue. They were like, look at this. It brought us out of Egypt. Dude, it didn't bring you out of Egypt. It was a necklace an hour ago. And it sounds silly. I get it. But is it any sillier than finding your whole identity and worth and purpose in a sport that you might not even play after high school or maybe college? Is it any sillier than throwing all of your identity and energy and worth into a job or career that will probably put your job listing on its website before you are even out of the parking lot? We have the living water. We have the God of the universe, but we continue to put things that are substandard in its place. Do you guys see? We're going to take a look at Exodus 32, verse 5. We're going to take a look at that again. This is part of the story that Brandon told. It says, when Aaron saw this, he built an altar in front of the calf and announced, tomorrow there will be a festival to the Lord. I want you to notice that Lord is in all capitals. This means, this is a signal to the reader in biblical text that they're talking about the God of Abraham, the God of the universe, the God of everything. So if you're like me, you might be like, wait, didn't they just make a calf and they're bowing and then a festival to the Lord? Like mixed signals here, and it is mixed signals. And so scholars have a couple of different theories as to what was meant by this. Like, why are they having a festival to the Lord after just building a calf that they're going to worship? And so one of the ways is that they think that maybe it's just because Aaron was a weak and ineffective ruler or leader, and he was really, really influenced by what the people wanted, and he didn't want to say no to them. So he let them build the idol, but he still was like, but we're still supposed to do this thing to the Lord, so we're going to do both. That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it was that they were never intending to fully denounce God. They weren't trying to say, like, we no longer believe in God, long live the calf. Like, that wasn't necessarily what they were saying. For years in Egypt, they used to put the idols alongside God. And I think that this is what they were saying by this. They were saying, like, we are still following God. Like, we still follow God, yeah. But we're going to bring along this other thing and put it on the same level as God. Give it the same power and authority as God. Because that's what they had been doing for generations. So there's a whole mess of lowercase, or what I call little g gods, that are vying for the attention and the position that should be to the one and only, to the one true God. And if I had to guess, I would say that that's where a lot of us in this room are right now. I think there's very few people in this room, and I could be wrong, but I think there's very few people in this room who are like completely denouncing God. Like, I don't believe, I don't follow, none of that stuff. Again, assumption, but I think it's a strong one. But we might call God Lord in all caps for the sake of the narrative, but in reality, that whole mess of little g gods has taken an equal position with God in our life, or maybe a little higher. right? So instead of giving sole power to the one who should be deserving it, we're continually putting our faith in things that are going to let us down. So what do we do about this? How do we destroy the idols in our lives? Well, naturally, that makes me think back to my concert, my Backstreet Boys concert. And, this was the concert of the millennium, no pun intended. And I was pumped. Like, the energy was amazing. We were so excited. We were in the front row of the upper balcony. Like, the lights went down. There were 2 opening acts to go, and people went nuts. Like, the Backstreet Boys weren't even anywhere near coming out, and everyone's excited. And at one point in the concert, they actually got on these, like, harnesses, and they were on these, like, hoverboard things. It was all about future, yeah. But if you're like, what the heck are you talking about, Lauren? Here's a picture. Picture was worth 1,000 words. So there you go. They're, like, flying on these hoverboards. And so what this allows is if you are like my sister and I in the front row of the upper balcony of the Gund Arena, known at the time, you actually now get the chance to, like, reach over and possibly touch the hand of the Backstreet Boy. Like, that's normally for the rich people in the front row. Like, here we are. So this is super, super exciting. Now, actually, I thought in my memory, there's like a plexiglass barrier. In my memory, as like 3 dozen teenage girls leaned over, I thought the glass started to break. That was always how I remembered it in my mind. So I asked my sister, and she's like, no, that did not happen. I was like, all right, fine. So my memory is infallible, whatever. So, but yeah, this was super exciting. Like, we reached over. We did not get to touch the hand. I think they were further than what it seemed, but they were right there. And it was also not my favorite Backstreet Boy. It was not Nick or Brian. I think it was Howie, and that's disappointing. But either way, what are you going to do? But either way, like, this was an experience. Like, the energy, just everything that we went through and what my parents went through to get us to this concert, like, what an experience. Definitely something for the memory banks, although maybe not 100% since I clearly remembered it wrong. But either way, how do we destroy the idols in our lives? How do we put them back in their rightful places? What we need to do is we need to remember who we were made to worship. And here's some things, practical things that we can do. So here's this list right here. First thing, actually make a list of the blessings that God has given you. Like, what is your proverbial parting of the Red Sea? When did God give you bread from the sky? When did God pull water from a rock when it seemed like all hope was lost? We all have examples of that in our lives. Make a list of them. And like the Israelites who continually forgot, even though they experienced it and saw that with their own eyes, we do the same thing. So remember it. Maybe put it somewhere, like students, put it in your locker or in like a planner or a folder that you tend to carry around with you all day at school. Put that list of things there. Adults, maybe stick it on your steering wheel or on your bedroom mirror or something. Something to remind you of what God has done for you. Then take an honest look at what occupies your time, your actions, and your thoughts. Like, what is it that dictates what you do and how you do it? I get it. The majority of us spend the majority of our time at work or at school. That's just life, right? That's reality. I'm not suggesting that we don't do that. Students are like, darn it, told me I should put God first. I'm not suggesting that we don't do those things. That's not reality. But when you are doing those things, when you are doing all the things that are required to be a responsible human being, is God the one leading that? Is God at the center of that? Is he dictating how you act in certain situations? Is he dictating how you speak to people? Is he dictating the decisions that you make in the midst of living your life? That's putting God at the center. And so that's what I would want you to take an honest look at. Do you put God on hold when things get hard? Do you put God on hold when it's basketball season? So that means you have to miss 3 months of church? Do you put God on hold when something goes on in your life that doesn't make sense? Like, is God always at the center, no matter what's going on around you? And I recognize that's not easy. I'm not trying to say it is. And the last thing is look at what or who you run to first in times of trouble. Start to take note of this. Like, something's going wrong. Is your first instinct to go to God in prayer or see what he talks about in his word? Or is it your spouse, for those adults in the room? Is it your best friend? Is it the dopamine hit that comes from scrolling on social media? Is it maybe a show or a YouTube channel that you put on whenever you're stressed? Is it shopping? Is it a substance? Or is it God? What do you run to first in times of trouble is a good indicator of what's in the most important spot in your life. We need to approach our God with the intensity and the fervor of a teenage girl at the concert of her favorite band. I'm going to do everything I can to get in the presence of this. I'm going to stand in line at a box office. I'm going to put my face next to a speaker and listen to songs and try to be the ninth caller. I'm going to do everything I can to be in the presence of this because it's that important to me. Can you honestly say that that is how you approach every day with your relationship with God? Let's pray.